So here you get to see the cable car turn around directly to your left once we approach this intersection here. Now, underneath these tracks is actually a continuously moving cable that never stops moving at a continuous speed of 9.5 miles an hour. And when that cable car engineer, or the gripman as it's called, when he wants to move that cable car, it has an actual lever that attaches to that continuously moving cable and moves that cable car. When he wants to stop that cable car, it releases that grip and applies the brakes. And that is 18th century technology at its finest. As well. Now, bridge officials, they thought it would be a good idea in order to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge to close down the bridge to vehicular traffic and only allow for pedestrian traffic to walk across the entire bridge to celebrate that day. Could you imagine that? And bridge officials, they guesstimated that, well, maybe about 50,000 people at best would show up. And what actually ended up happening is 800,000 people showed up. Yes, that's right, 800,000 people. So here's some food for thought, ladies and gentlemen. San Francisco does have an estimated population of about 770,000 people. So just imagine every man, woman, and child that lives in San Francisco all on the bridge at the exact same time. Let's throw an extra 30,000 people, and that just gives you a general idea of just how dense the population was all on the bridge at once. Now, you notice how whenever you're looking at a side view of the Golden Gate Bridge, how it has an arch to it? Well, on that particular day, the bridge actually flattened out in the center because it sunk down 14 feet because of all the weight. So now we know we have a very sturdy and flexible Golden Gate Bridge. True story. It took about 2 weeks for the bridge to return back to its normal state. So because of that, for obvious reasons, bridge officials vowed to never try that again, and I don't blame them. So off to your right over there is another view of Alcatraz Island, and in 1934, Alcatraz Island opened up and was used as a federal penitentiary. When it opened, it actually became the penitentiary where they sent the worst of the worst, meaning if you were already serving time in another correctional institution and you continued to get into more trouble, the next step was to send you to Alcatraz Island, aka the Rock to serve your time. And through the duration of the time that it remained open as a penitentiary, there were 17 escape attempts involving 14 different men, and 3 of those men were actually presumed drowned because their bodies were never actually recovered, but no one knows if they escaped successfully for sure or not. So with that being said, they could actually be on the bus with us right now. We would not even know it. And then finally in 1963, prison officials finally decided to close down Alcatraz as a penitentiary because it just became too costly to maintain. Obviously, anything they ever needed had to be shipped over. The buildings were starting to fall apart, and prison authorities just finally decided that there were other prisons in the same system that could serve the same purpose at a fraction of the cost. So now Alcatraz Island remains open only for your viewing and touring pleasure.
didn't look at. We'll go on our own and just. Actually, an old boat to right there. Yeah, I'll probably back.
Ich kann das nicht sehen von hier. Ja, ja, welche Jahr ist ja.
To me in the SUV, and I'm looking at him like, and then I think he realized that I realized who he was, and he waved back at me and that Muir. Down there, that sign there tells you all about it. That's it.
Hey, Jesse! Izzy!
That concludes our visit to Muir Woods. I do hope everyone got a chance to enjoy some of the sights and scenes here. Maybe even take advantage of that weird smell. It's called fresh air. It's very okay to breathe. Did anyone see any wildlife this morning? Chipmunks hanging out by the cafe, possibly? Well, what often happens a lot of times, as I'm sure you notice how the redwoods do create such a dark and dense environment around everything inside, does not always allow for a lot of vegetation to grow that a lot of wildlife would necessarily be interested in. So if you do or did happen to see some wildlife this morning, do consider it very lucky. Here on our right hand side here, this is the parking for the general public. And as you can see, this lot gets full very quickly. So as we drive further and further away from that same main entrance that we all had the luxury of only walking a couple of 100 yards to, you're also going to begin to notice the lines of cars starting to form along sides of the roads up ahead here. And all these people will be walking back towards that same main entrance. And as the day progresses, I'm sure that line will get longer and longer. Call this the hike before the hike. Parks that are named after John Muir, in addition to the schools and hospitals named after him. Now, believe it or not, a lot of the fog that we get here in the Mill Valley areas, especially in our drier summertime months, is actually very beneficial to our coastal redwood trees here, because those coastal redwoods, they're actually able to absorb a lot of the moisture directly out of the fog instead of having to draw all of its nutrients solely from its roots down below. So that's what helps to keep those coastal redwoods thriving, especially through our drier summertime months here in the Mill Valley area. We're strapped to the top, and most likely those folks will be headed out to Stinson Beach to try to see if they can catch some of those great waves for the day. So a lot of the locals that do live in the nearby areas, they will utilize this portion of Highway 1 for a variety of different reasons. If you're ever given the opportunity to travel throughout Northern and Southern California by vehicle, I do highly encourage you to take the Highway 1 route, because along the way there are just some magnificent views and vista points of the Pacific Ocean and just a variety of other sceneries. process all over again. So I would say that is pretty good job security, wouldn't you? I also noticed every so often along the right-hand sides of the bridge here, they have these little blue and white signs that read emergency phone and crisis counseling. Now, what kind of crisis do you think you might be having on the Golden Gate Bridge, I wonder? Now, that's been a long-standing controversy about the Golden Gate Bridge on whether or not to put a suicide barriers along the bridge, because the people that are for it obviously believe that it helps save lives, and yet the people that are against it believe that it'll only take away from the beauty of the bridge, and that if somebody really wants to jump that, they'll figure out a way to do it regardless. So I guess those phones are all the way that bridge authorities decided to meet in the middle on that whole issue, with the hopes that someone who may be on the bridge having a bad day may see that phone and decide to use it. So the portion of the bridge directly in the center that we are just about to drive over is the highest point above the water, 220 feet, and that is just high enough for a person to reach terminal velocity just before hitting the water if they were to jump off at that point, which is also the equivalent of running your car into a brick wall at 70 miles an hour. Just a little FYI. So on your left-hand side is the San Francisco Bay, and on your right-hand side is the Pacific Ocean, ladies and gentlemen. Just off to the right at the end of the bridge, that's Baker Beach over there. That's also the Sea Cliff neighborhood. Now, at any one of our surrounding beaches here in San Francisco, whether it's Baker Beach or Ocean Beach or what have you, just about any time you see somebody surfing in the water or whatnot, they're almost always going to have a wetsuit on, because the temperature of that water is very cold, usually anywhere between 40 to 60 degrees in temperature. That is year-round, because the Pacific Ocean water never really gets that warm.